There is something happening inside you, and you can feel it. You're not the same person anymore. The things that once excited you don't hit the same. The noise around you feels heavier, and your mind is becoming quieter, but deeper. It's confusing because nothing outside has changed, but inside, everything feels different. You may feel distant. You may feel alone. You may even feel like you're losing something. But what if I told you, you're not losing anything, you're awakening? Buddhist wisdom says, before the mind becomes peaceful, it becomes aware, and awareness changes everything. It breaks illusions, it exposes truth, and it separates you from everything that once controlled you. That's why this phase feels uncomfortable, because you're no longer asleep. In this video, you're going to understand 15 powerful lessons that explain exactly what is happening inside you right now. And once you see this clearly, you will never look at your mind the same way again. 1. Awareness is the first awakening. There is a moment when everything inside you quietly changes. Not outside, inside. You start noticing your thoughts. Before this, every thought felt real. Every emotion controlled you. But now, something is different. A thought comes, and instead of becoming it, you watch it. That small shift is powerful, because the moment you observe your thoughts, you stop being controlled by them. Buddhist wisdom teaches this clearly. You are not your thoughts. You are the one watching them. And once you realize this, everything begins to change. You react less. You feel calmer. You stop getting pulled into every emotion. It's not because life got easier. It's because your mind is no longer running you. Most people live their whole life inside their mind without ever questioning it. But you've started to see it. And once you see it, you can't go back. This is the first awakening. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, but powerful enough to change your entire life. 2. Detachment brings real freedom. There is something most people don't realize. The more you hold on, the more you suffer. You try to control people. You try to control outcomes. You try to hold on to moments that are already slipping away. And slowly, it drains you. Because deep down, you feel it. Nothing stays the same. But still, the mind keeps clinging. It says, this should not change. This should stay forever. This must go my way. And when it doesn't, you feel pain. Not because of what happened, but because of what you expected. This is where Buddhist wisdom becomes powerful. It teaches one simple truth. Attachment is the root of suffering. The tighter you hold, the more it hurts when life moves. But when you begin to let go, something shifts. Not that you stop caring, not that you become cold. You simply stop depending. You stop needing everything to go your way. You allow things to come, and you allow them to leave. And in that space, you feel lighter, free, because now your peace is no longer controlled by people, or situation, or outcomes. It comes from within. Detachment is not loss. It is power. The power to stay calm, even when life changes. And once you understand this, you stop chasing. You stop forcing. You simply flow. And that's where real freedom begins. 3. Suffering comes from attachment. Most people think suffering comes from life, from problems, from people, from situations. But that's not the truth. Suffering doesn't come from what happens. It comes from what you hold on to. You don't suffer because something ended. You suffer because you didn't want it to end. You don't suffer because life changed. You suffer because you wanted it to stay the same. And this is where the mind traps you. It creates an image of how things should be. And when reality doesn't match that image, you feel pain. Not because reality is wrong, but because your attachment is strong. Buddhist wisdom explains this clearly. The deeper the attachment, the deeper the suffering. Because attachment creates expectation, and expectation creates disappointment. You start depending on things to make you feel okay. A person, a result, a moment. And the moment they change or disappear, you feel empty. But here's the shift. When you stop clinging, you stop suffering the same way. You begin to accept things as they are. Not forcing, not resisting, just understanding. Everything comes and everything goes. And once you truly accept this, pain may still come, but suffering no longer controls you. Because now, you are not holding on to what was never meant to stay. 4. The present moment is all you have. There is a quiet truth that most people spend their entire lives running away from. You are almost never here. Your body is here, but your mind is somewhere else, thinking about what already happened, or worrying about what might happen next. You replay conversations that are long gone. You imagine problems that don't even exist yet. And without realizing it, you miss the only thing that is real. This moment, right now. Buddhist wisdom teaches something very simple, but very powerful. The present moment is all you ever truly have. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, only this. But the mind doesn't like this truth. Because the present moment is quiet, and the mind is addicted to noise, it constantly pulls you away, into regret, into anxiety, into endless thinking. And the more you follow it, the more restless you feel, because the past cannot be changed, and the future cannot be controlled. Yet the mind keeps trying, and that struggle is what creates your stress. Think about it. How many times have you suffered over something that never actually happened? How many nights have you stayed awake, thinking about things you cannot fix? This is what happens when you leave the present moment. You enter a world created by your mind, not reality. And in that world, everything feels heavier. But the moment you return, everything softens. Your breath slows down. Your thoughts become quieter. Your body relaxes. Nothing outside has changed, but inside, something has shifted. Because when you are fully present, you are no longer fighting life. You are experiencing it. This is why even simple things begin to feel different. A deep breath feels calming. Silence feels peaceful. Even doing nothing feels enough. Because you are no longer chasing the next moment or resisting the current one. You are just here. And in that state, there is no pressure, no rush, no mental noise pulling you in different directions. Just clarity. But staying present is not easy, because the mind will try to escape again. It will remind you of something from the past. It will create a new worry about the future. And if you're not aware, you'll follow it again. That's why presence is a practice, not something you achieve once, but something you return to again and again. Every time you notice your mind drifting and bring it back, you strengthen your awareness. You regain control. And slowly, the grip of overthinking begins to weaken. You start living more and thinking less. You start feeling more and worrying less. And this is where peace begins. Not in changing your life, but in fully experiencing it right now. Because the truth is, life is not happening in the past. Life is not waiting in the future. Life is happening here, in this breath, in this moment. And the more you return to it, the more you realize something powerful. You don't need more time. You don't need everything to be perfect. You just need to be present. Because when you are fully here, there is nothing missing and nothing to fear. Only peace, only clarity, only now. 5. Silence is powerful. There is something most people are afraid of. Silence. Not noise. Not chaos. Silence. Because the moment everything becomes quiet, you are left alone with your own mind. No distractions. No escape. Just you. And for most people, that feels uncomfortable. That's why they keep filling their life with noise. Constant talking. Constant scrolling. Constant stimulation. Anything to avoid sitting in silence. But what they don't realize is this. Silence is not empty. It is where everything becomes clear. Buddhist wisdom teaches that silence is not weakness. It is awareness. It is the space where truth reveals itself. When you are constantly surrounded by noise, your mind stays busy. And when your mind is busy, you cannot see clearly. You react faster. You think less deeply. You become controlled by emotions without even noticing. But when you enter silence, something shifts. At first, it feels strange. Your thoughts become louder. Old memories appear. Unfinished emotions rise. Things you ignored start coming back. And this is the moment most people run away. They think something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. This is the mind, finally being seen. Silence doesn't create chaos. It reveals it. And that is why it feels uncomfortable in the beginning. Because for the first time, you are not escaping your mind. You are facing it. But if you stay, if you don't run, if you allow the silence to exist, something incredible begins to happen. The thoughts slowly lose their power. Not because you forced them to stop, but because you stopped feeding them. You are no longer reacting to every thought. You are simply watching. And in that watching, the mind begins to settle. Like muddy water left untouched, it becomes clear on its own. This is the power of silence. It doesn't fight the mind. It calms it. And as the mind becomes quieter, you begin to notice things you never saw before. Your reactions slow down. Your awareness deepens. You start understanding yourself on a level that noise never allowed. You begin to see your patterns. What triggers you? What drains you? What truly matters? And what doesn't? And this clarity changes everything. Because now, you are no longer moving blindly. You are moving consciously. Silence also gives you something rare. Control. Not control over the world, but control over yourself. When you are used to noise, you react instantly. Someone says something, you respond immediately. Something happens, you react emotionally. There is no space, but silence creates space. Space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space, you gain power. You can choose. You can pause. You can remain calm, even when everything around you is not. And this is true strength. Not loud reactions, not constant expression, but quiet control, the ability to stay still when everything tries to move you. Buddhist monks understand this deeply. That's why they sit in silence. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they have mastered the need to say it. They have learned that not every thought needs to be spoken. Not every emotion needs to be expressed. Some things are better understood in silence. And when you begin to practice this, your presence changes. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You react less, but your calmness becomes stronger. People may not understand it, but they feel it. Because silence creates depth, and depth is rare. In a world full of noise, the quiet mind stands out, not by trying, but by simply being. And there is another truth hidden in silence: healing. When you stop running from yourself, you start understanding yourself. The pain you avoided begins to soften. The confusion you carried begins to clear. Because now you are giving yourself space. Space to process. Space to feel. Space to heal. Without distraction. Without pressure. Just awareness. And this is where real transformation begins. Not outside. Inside. In the quiet moments no one sees. In the stillness where you meet your true self. Because beneath all the noise, there is a deeper part of you. Calm, still, unshaken. And silence is the only way to reach it. But here's the truth most people won't accept. Silence requires courage. Because it forces you to face everything you've been avoiding. Your fears, your thoughts, your truth. Without distraction, without escape. And that is not easy. But it is necessary. Because the more you avoid silence, the more your mind controls you. And the more you embrace it, the more you control your mind. So the next time life becomes quiet, don't rush to fill it. Don't reach for your phone. Don't look for noise. Just sit. Just breathe. Just be. Let the silence exist. And watch what happens. Because in that silence, you will find something most people never discover: clarity, control, peace. And once you truly experience that, you will no longer fear silence. You will seek it, because you will understand. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is power. 6. You are not your thoughts. There is a hidden illusion that controls most people without them ever realizing it. And that illusion is the belief that every thought in your mind is who you are. From the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep, your mind is constantly producing thoughts, opinions, judgments, fears, and stories. And because this happens so automatically, you begin to identify with all of it. If a negative thought appears, you believe you are negative. If a fearful idea shows up, you believe you are afraid. If doubt arises, you assume something is wrong with you. This is where the confusion begins, because you are not seeing the truth clearly. Buddhist wisdom explains this in a very direct way. Thoughts are events that happen within the mind, not definitions of who you are. Just like clouds passing through the sky, thoughts pass through your awareness. The problem is not that thoughts exist. The problem is that you hold on to them, follow them, and build your identity around them. When a thought appears, instead of observing it, you immediately step into it. And once you step into it, it begins to control your emotions, your reactions, and even your decisions. Think about how many thoughts pass through your mind every single day. Some of them contradict each other. Some of them are irrational. And many of them are repeated patterns that have been playing for years. If all of these thoughts were truly you, then your identity would be constantly unstable, constantly shifting from one extreme to another. But there is something within you that remains stable. Something that notices these thoughts instead of becoming them, and that is your awareness. This is the turning point. The moment you realize that you can observe your thoughts means you are separate from them. You cannot observe something that you are completely merged with. The fact that you can notice a thought means there is a deeper part of you that is watching. That part is calm, silent, and unchanged by the constant movement of the mind. At first, this realization feels subtle, almost too simple to be powerful, but if you stay with it, it changes everything. When a thought arises, instead of reacting immediately, you begin to pause. You begin to see it as just a thought, not a command, not a truth, not something that must be followed. This pause creates space, and in that space, your power begins to grow. Without this awareness, the mind operates on autopilot. A negative thought appears, and you instantly feel negative. A stressful idea comes up, and your body reacts as if the situation is real. This creates a cycle where thoughts generate emotions, emotions reinforce thoughts, and the loop continues without interruption. But when you start observing instead of reacting, that cycle begins to weaken. You start to notice patterns. You see how the same fears repeat themselves, how the same doubts return again and again, and how most of these thoughts are not even based on reality, but on assumptions, memories, or imagined outcomes. This realization breaks the illusion that every thought deserves your attention. One of the most powerful shifts happens when you stop trying to control your thoughts and start observing them instead. Many people believe they need to silence the mind completely, but forcing the mind to be quiet often creates more tension. The goal is not to eliminate thoughts, but to change your relationship with them. When you stop resisting and simply observe, the mind naturally begins to settle. It is like sitting by a river and watching the water flow. You are not trying to stop the river. You are not jumping into it. You are simply watching it pass. In the same way, thoughts come and go, but you remain still. Over time, the intensity of those thoughts decreases because you are no longer feeding them with constant attention. This is where emotional freedom begins. When you are no longer attached to every thought, your emotional state becomes more stable. You are not pulled up and down by every idea that crosses your mind. You begin to experience a sense of calm that is not dependent on external situations. This calmness is not something you force. It is something that naturally emerges when the mind is no longer in control. Another important realization is that not every thought is true. The mind often creates stories based on past experiences or future fears, and these stories can feel very real. You might think something bad will happen, or that someone is judging you, or that you are not good enough. These thoughts create strong emotional reactions, but when you step back and observe them, you begin to see that they are just mental constructions, not facts. This awareness allows you to question your thoughts instead of blindly believing them. Instead of accepting every idea as truth, you start to see it as a possibility, something that can be examined. This shift reduces the power that negative thinking has over you because you are no longer giving it automatic authority. As this practice deepens, you begin to experience a different kind of identity. Instead of defining yourself by your thoughts, you begin to recognize yourself as the awareness behind them. This awareness is steady, quiet, and not affected by the constant noise of the mind. It does not judge, it does not rush, and it does not create unnecessary suffering. It simply observes. This is what Buddhist teachings refer to when they talk about detaching from the mind. It is not about becoming empty or losing your personality. It is about seeing clearly that your true nature is not limited to the thoughts you experience. When you understand this, you stop taking every thought personally. You stop reacting to every mental event as if it defines you. Over time, this creates a profound sense of freedom. You are no longer trapped in cycles of overthinking. You are no longer overwhelmed by every emotional reaction. You begin to move through life with a sense of clarity and calm that was not possible before. There will still be thoughts. There will still be moments of doubt, fear, or stress. But the difference is that you will not be consumed by them. You will see them for what they are, temporary movements in the mind. And because of that, they will not have the same control over you. This is the deeper meaning of understanding that you are not your thoughts. It is not just an idea to think about. It is something to experience directly. The more you observe your mind, the more this truth becomes real, and the more your life begins to change. When you stop identifying with every thought, you create space for something else to emerge, something quieter, something more stable, something that does not depend on constant mental activity. That is where peace begins, not by controlling the outside world, but by understanding the nature of your own mind. And once you truly see this, once you experience the difference between being lost in thought and simply observing it, you cannot go back to the same level of unconsciousness. You have seen the separation, you have felt the space, and you have realized that your mind is a tool, not your identity. From that point forward, your relationship with yourself changes. You begin to live with more awareness, more control, and less unnecessary suffering. You begin to experience life more directly, without the constant interference of uncontrolled thinking. This is not the end of the journey, but it is a powerful step forward. Because when you understand that you are not your thoughts, you take back control of your mind, and when you take back control of your mind, you take back control of your life. 7. Ego is the source of illusion. There is something inside you that constantly demands attention, control, and recognition, and most people spend their entire lives obeying it without ever questioning its authority. It speaks in your voice, it feels like your identity, and it convinces you that it is who you truly are. This is the ego, and in Buddhist wisdom, it is considered the root of illusion. The ego is not something physical. You cannot touch it, you cannot see it directly, yet it influences almost every decision you make. It is the part of you that says, "This is me, this is mine, this is what I deserve." It builds an identity out of your name, your past, your achievements, your failures, your opinions, and your desires. It creates a story, and then it traps you inside that story. At first, this seems harmless. You need an identity to function in the world, to communicate, to navigate life. But the problem begins when you start believing that this identity is permanent and absolute. The ego wants to protect itself, to strengthen itself, and to constantly prove itself. It does not like being questioned, and it certainly does not like being ignored. This is why you feel the need to defend yourself even when it is unnecessary. This is why criticism feels painful, even when it is small. This is why you compare yourself to others, seeking validation, recognition, or superiority. The ego is always measuring, always judging, always trying to maintain its position. But here is the truth that Buddhist teachings reveal. The ego is not your true self. It is a construction, a collection of thoughts and beliefs that you have gathered over time. It is shaped by your experiences, your environment, and your conditioning. It is not something fixed, and it is not something permanent. The illusion begins when you fully identify with it. When someone criticizes you, the ego feels attacked, and you react emotionally. When you achieve something, the ego feels elevated, and you attach your worth to that success. When you lose something, the ego feels diminished, and you suffer. In all of these situations, the ego is at the center, constantly trying to maintain control over how you see yourself and how others see you. This creates a constant cycle of instability. Your sense of self rises and falls based on external circumstances. You feel good when things go your way, and you feel bad when they don't. You become dependent on outcomes, on validation, on how others perceive you, and because these things are always changing, your inner state becomes unstable as well. The ego thrives on comparison. It wants to be better than someone, or at least not worse. It looks at others and measures your worth against them. This creates competition, jealousy, pride, and insecurity. Even when you succeed, the ego is not satisfied for long. It quickly finds a new comparison, a new standard, a new reason to feel incomplete. This is why no amount of external success can bring lasting peace if the ego is in control. You can achieve everything you once desired and still feel empty, still feel restless, still feel like something is missing, because the ego is never at peace. It is always searching, always wanting more. Buddhist wisdom teaches that true peace comes not from feeding the ego, but from seeing through it. When you begin to observe the ego, just like you observe your thoughts, you start to realize that it is not as solid as it seems. It is constantly changing, constantly reacting, constantly trying to maintain its image. You begin to notice how it appears in different situations. When you feel the need to prove yourself, that is the ego. When you feel hurt because someone did not recognize your effort, that is the ego. When you feel superior or inferior to someone else, that is the ego. It is always there, shaping your reactions, influencing your emotions. But the moment you see it clearly, something shifts. You create distance between yourself and the ego. You no longer react automatically to its demands. You begin to question it. You begin to see that not every reaction it creates is necessary. Not every thought it produces is true, and not every emotion it triggers needs to be followed. This is where freedom begins. When you are no longer controlled by the ego, you stop taking everything personally. You stop feeling the need to constantly defend your image. You become less reactive, less sensitive to judgment, and more stable in your sense of self. You are no longer trying to prove something to the world, because you are no longer defined by the ego's story. This does not mean you lose your personality or become passive. It means you act from a deeper place, not from insecurity or the need for validation, but from clarity and understanding. You still have preferences, you still make decisions, but they are no longer driven by the ego's constant need to control. One of the most powerful changes that happens when the ego loses its grip is the disappearance of unnecessary conflict. Most conflicts are not about the situation itself, but about the ego trying to protect its identity. When the ego is not in control, you no longer feel the need to argue over every disagreement or defend every opinion. You can listen, understand, and respond calmly. You also begin to experience a deeper connection with others. When the ego is dominant, relationships are often based on comparison, expectation, and control. But when you are no longer operating from the ego, you relate to others more authentically. You are not trying to be superior or avoid being inferior. You simply are. This creates a sense of ease in your interactions. You are not constantly thinking about how you are being perceived. You are not trying to maintain an image. You are present, genuine, and open. And this changes the quality of your relationships in a profound way. Another important shift is the reduction of fear. The ego is deeply connected to fear because it is always trying to protect itself. It fears failure, rejection, loss, and uncertainty. But when you are no longer fully identified with the ego, these fears lose their intensity. You realize that your true self is not threatened by these things in the same way the ego is. You become more willing to take risks, to step outside your comfort zone, and to accept uncertainty. Not because you are fearless, but because you are not as attached to the ego's need for security and control. Letting go of the ego does not happen instantly. It is a gradual process of awareness and understanding. The more you observe it, the less power it has. The more you question it, the weaker it becomes. And the more you connect with the deeper awareness within you, the less you rely on the ego for your sense of identity. There will still be moments when the ego appears strongly. There will still be situations where you feel the urge to defend, to compare, or to control. But the difference is that you will see it happening. You will recognize it, and in that recognition, you will have a choice. You can follow the ego, or you can let it pass. And every time you choose awareness over ego, you strengthen your inner freedom. This is the essence of Buddhist teaching on the ego. It is not something to fight or destroy, but something to understand. When you understand it deeply, you see through its illusions. And when you see through its illusions, it loses its power over you. What remains is something much more stable, something that does not depend on comparison, validation, or control. A sense of self that is not built on fragile ideas, but on direct awareness. And from that place, life becomes lighter. You no longer carry the constant weight of trying to be someone. You no longer feel the need to maintain an image. You are not trapped in the endless cycle of proving and defending. You simply exist, clear, calm, free. And that is what happens when the illusion of the ego begins to fade. 8. Everything is temporary. There is a truth that the mind resists more than anything else, a truth so simple that it is often ignored, yet so powerful that once you fully understand it, your entire relationship with life begins to change. That truth is this: everything is temporary. At first, this idea may seem obvious. You already know that time passes, that situations change, that nothing stays exactly the same forever. But knowing something intellectually is very different from truly seeing it. Most people live as if things will last, as if moments can be held, as if people will remain the same, as if life will follow a stable and predictable path. And it is this silent expectation that creates so much inner struggle. The mind wants permanence. It wants to hold on to what feels good and push away what feels painful. It wants certainty, stability, and control. But life does not operate that way. Life is constantly moving, constantly changing, constantly evolving. Every moment is shifting into the next, whether you are aware of it or not. Think about how many things in your life have already changed. People who were once close are no longer part of your daily life. Situations that once felt permanent have disappeared. Emotions that once felt overwhelming have faded. Even the version of yourself from a few years ago no longer exists in the same way. Everything has moved. Everything has transformed. Yet the mind still tries to hold on. It says, this feeling should stay. This person should not change. This moment should last longer. And when reality does not match these expectations, you feel resistance. You feel discomfort. You feel loss. Not because change itself is painful, but because you are trying to stop what cannot be stopped. Buddhist wisdom teaches that impermanence is not something to fear, but something to understand deeply. Because when you truly understand that everything is temporary, your attachment begins to loosen. You stop clinging so tightly to moments, to people, to outcomes. You begin to appreciate them without trying to own them. This shift is subtle, but it is powerful. When you realize that a moment will not last forever, you begin to experience it more fully. You become more present, more aware, more connected. Instead of taking things for granted, you start to see their value. A simple conversation feels more meaningful. A quiet moment feels more peaceful. Even small experiences begin to carry depth. At the same time, this understanding changes how you relate to pain. When something difficult happens, the mind immediately reacts as if it will last forever. It tells you that this feeling will not end, that this situation will not improve, that this discomfort is permanent. And because of that belief, the pain feels heavier. But when you understand impermanence, you see things differently. You realize that no emotion, no matter how intense, can remain forever. Just like happiness comes and goes, so does sadness. Just like calmness fades, so does anxiety. Everything rises, stays for a while, and then passes. This does not mean you ignore pain or pretend it is not there. It means you see it clearly, without adding the extra weight of believing it will last forever. And in that clarity, something changes. The intensity of suffering begins to decrease. You begin to sit with your emotions instead of fighting them. You allow them to exist without trying to control them. And because you are no longer resisting them, they move through you more naturally. This is one of the deepest forms of freedom. You are no longer trapped in the illusion of permanence. You are no longer trying to freeze moments or hold on to things that are meant to change. You are moving with life instead of against it. Another important shift happens in how you view loss. Loss becomes less about something being taken away and more about something completing its natural cycle. When you understand that everything is temporary, you see that nothing was ever truly yours to keep forever. It was there for a time, and now it has moved on. This does not remove the feeling of sadness, but it changes its nature. The sadness becomes softer, less resistant, more accepting. It is no longer filled with anger or confusion. It becomes a quiet acknowledgement of change. At the same time, this understanding protects you from becoming overly attached to success or pleasure. When something good happens, the ego wants to hold on to it, to repeat it, to make it permanent. But when you understand impermanence, you enjoy it without becoming dependent on it. You appreciate it while it lasts, knowing that it will eventually change. This creates balance. You are not overly attached when things are good, and you are not completely broken when things are difficult. You remain steady, aware that both are temporary states. This steadiness is what Buddhist teachings aim to cultivate, not a life without change, but a mind that is not shaken by it. As this understanding deepens, you begin to experience time differently. You are no longer rushing through moments, trying to get to the next thing. You are no longer lost in constant anticipation or regret. You are more grounded, more present, more connected to what is happening right now. You begin to see that life is not something you can hold, but something you can experience. And this changes how you live. You speak more carefully because you know moments pass. You listen more deeply because you know time is limited. You appreciate more because you know nothing stays. Even your own identity begins to feel lighter. You realize that the version of you that exists today is also temporary. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, your preferences, they are all changing over time. You are not a fixed entity. You are a process, constantly evolving. This realization removes a lot of pressure. You no longer feel the need to have everything figured out. You no longer feel trapped by your past or limited by your current state. You understand that change is always possible, because change is always happening. And this opens the door to growth. When you accept impermanence, you stop resisting transformation. You become more flexible, more open, more willing to adapt. You are not trying to hold on to an old version of yourself. You are allowing yourself to evolve naturally. At the deepest level, this understanding leads to peace. Not because life becomes stable, but because you stop expecting it to be. You are no longer surprised by change. You are no longer disturbed by the natural flow of life. You understand it, you accept it, and you move with it. This does not make life less meaningful. It makes it more meaningful. Because when you know something will not last, you value it more. When you know time is limited, you use it more wisely. When you know everything is temporary, you stop wasting energy trying to control what cannot be controlled. You begin to live more fully, more consciously, more peacefully. And this is the gift of understanding impermanence. It frees you from the illusion that things should stay the same. It releases you from the pain of trying to hold on. It allows you to experience life as it truly is, constantly changing, constantly moving, constantly unfolding. Once you truly see this, once you feel it not just as an idea but as a reality, something inside you relaxes. You stop fighting time. You stop resisting change. You stop clinging to what is already moving away. And in that release, you find a quiet kind of peace. A peace that does not depend on things staying the same. A peace that exists even as everything changes. Because you finally understand, everything comes, everything goes. And that is exactly how it is meant to be. 9. Control your mind, not the world. There is a silent struggle that most people are trapped in every single day, and they don't even realize it. It is the constant attempt to control everything outside themselves. You try to control how people behave, how situations unfold, how life should go, how others should treat you, and how the future should turn out. You build expectations, you create plans, and you imagine outcomes, believing that if everything goes your way, then you will finally feel calm, satisfied, and at peace. But life does not follow your script. People don't always act the way you expect. Situations don't unfold the way you planned. Outcomes don't match your desires. And when this happens, you feel frustration, anger, disappointment, and stress, not because life is wrong, but because it did not match the version you created in your mind. This is where suffering begins. Buddhist wisdom teaches a powerful truth. You cannot control the world, but you can control your mind. And once you understand this deeply, your entire experience of life begins to shift. Think about how much energy you spend trying to control things that are not in your hands. You worry about what others think of you. You replay conversations, wishing you had said something different. You imagine future problems, trying to prepare for every possible outcome. You try to manage every detail, believing that control will bring certainty. But the more you try to control everything, the more unstable you feel. Because the world is constantly changing, and no matter how much you plan, there will always be uncertainty. There will always be variables you cannot predict, people you cannot control, and situations you cannot fully manage. When your peace depends on controlling these things, your peace becomes fragile. It rises when things go your way, and it falls when they don't. You become reactive, constantly adjusting your emotional state based on what is happening outside. This creates a cycle of instability, where your inner world is controlled by your outer circumstances. But there is another way. Instead of trying to control everything outside, you shift your focus inward. You begin to observe your reactions, your thoughts, your emotions. You start to notice how your mind responds to situations, how it creates stress, how it amplifies problems, how it holds on to things that are already over. This is where your real power lies. You may not be able to control what happens, but you can control how you respond, and your response shapes your entire experience. When something unexpected happens, the mind immediately reacts. It labels the situation as good or bad, it creates a story around it, and it triggers an emotional response. This happens so quickly that it feels automatic. But when you bring awareness into this process, you create a gap between what happens and how you respond. In that gap, you have a choice. You can react the same way you always have, or you can respond differently. This is the beginning of mastery. When you control your mind, you are no longer controlled by every situation. You are no longer pulled in every direction by external events. You become steady, grounded, and clear, even when life is unpredictable. This does not mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you become conscious. You still take action, you still make decisions, but your actions are no longer driven by impulsive reactions or emotional instability. They are guided by awareness and understanding. One of the biggest changes that happens when you shift from controlling the world to controlling your mind is the reduction of stress. Stress is often not caused by the situation itself, but by how you think about it. The mind exaggerates problems, imagines worst-case scenarios, and creates unnecessary pressure. It turns small challenges into overwhelming burdens. But when you observe your thoughts instead of believing them, you begin to see things more clearly. You realize that many of your worries are not based on reality, but on assumptions and fears. This realization reduces the intensity of stress, because you are no longer feeding it with constant mental activity. You also begin to let go of the need for constant certainty. The mind wants to know what will happen, how things will turn out, and whether everything will be okay. But life does not offer that level of certainty. When you try to force certainty, you create anxiety. But when you accept uncertainty, you create space. You begin to trust that you can handle whatever comes, not because you control the outcome, but because you control your response. This creates a deep sense of confidence. Not the confidence that everything will go perfectly, but the confidence that you will remain stable regardless of what happens. Another important shift happens in your relationships. When you try to control people, you create tension. You expect them to behave in certain ways, to meet your standards, to align with your expectations. And when they don't, you feel frustrated or disappointed. But when you focus on controlling your own mind, you release that pressure. You allow others to be as they are, without trying to change them. You respond with understanding instead of reaction. This creates more peaceful and authentic interactions. You are no longer trying to control others. You are managing your own reactions. This also applies to how you view success and failure. When you try to control outcomes, success becomes something you must achieve, and failure becomes something you must avoid. This creates pressure and fear. But when you focus on your mind, success becomes about how you act, how you respond, how you grow. Failure becomes an experience, not a definition. You begin to see that what matters most is not what happens, but how you handle what happens. This perspective removes a lot of unnecessary weight. You are no longer trying to force life into a specific shape. You are flowing with it, adapting to it, responding to it with awareness. And this is where true freedom begins. Because freedom is not about controlling everything around you. It is about not being controlled by it. When your mind is steady, external chaos does not disturb you in the same way. When your mind is clear, Confusion outside does not overwhelm you. When your mind is calm, pressure outside does not break you. You become stable in an unstable world. This is the essence of inner mastery. It is not something that happens overnight. It requires practice, awareness, and patience. The mind will still try to control things. It will still create expectations and react to situations. But each time you notice this and bring your attention back to your response, you strengthen your ability to stay centered. Over time, this becomes more natural. You react less impulsively. You think more clearly. You feel more stable. And slowly, the need to control everything outside begins to fade. You begin to understand that life does not need to be controlled to be experienced. It does not need to be perfect to be meaningful. It does not need to follow your plans to be valuable. It simply needs to be lived. And when you control your mind instead of the world, you begin to live in a completely different way, with less stress, with more clarity, with deeper peace, because now your inner state is not dependent on external conditions. It is created from within, and that is something no situation, no person, and no outcome can take away from you. 10. Let go of the need to be understood. There is a quiet pressure that shapes how most people live their lives, and it often goes unnoticed. It is the constant need to be understood by others. The need for people to agree with you, to see your intentions clearly, to recognize your worth, to validate your feelings, and to confirm that you are right. At first, this seems natural. You want to be heard. You want to be seen. You want to be understood. But slowly, this need becomes a hidden attachment. You begin to explain yourself too much. You begin to justify your decisions. You begin to shape your actions based on how others might perceive you. And without realizing it, your peace becomes dependent on other people's understanding. This is where the problem begins. Because no matter how clearly you speak, no matter how honestly you act, not everyone will understand you. People see the world through their own experiences, their own beliefs, their own limitations. What is clear to you may be confusing to someone else. What feels right to you may not make sense to another. And when you expect everyone to understand you, you create a constant source of frustration. You feel misunderstood. You feel judged. You feel the need to correct people's perceptions. You replay conversations in your mind, thinking about what you should have said differently. You try to control how others see you, hoping that if they just understood you properly, everything would feel better. But this is an endless cycle, because you cannot control how others think. Buddhist wisdom teaches something very freeing. You do not need to be understood to be at peace. The moment you truly accept this, something inside you begins to relax. You stop trying to explain yourself to everyone. You stop seeking constant validation. You stop depending on others to confirm your identity. And in that release, you gain a powerful kind of independence. This does not mean you stop communicating or expressing yourself. It means you no longer attach your inner stability to whether or not someone understands you. You speak when necessary, you express when it matters, but you are not disturbed when others fail to fully grasp your perspective, because you understand something deeper. Not everyone is meant to understand you. Some people will see you clearly. Some people will misunderstand you completely. And most people will only understand parts of you. This is not a problem. It is simply the nature of human perception. When you accept this, you stop taking misunderstanding personally. You stop seeing it as rejection or failure. You see it as a difference in perspective. This shift changes how you respond. Instead of reacting emotionally when someone misunderstands you, you remain calm. Instead of trying to force your point across, you allow space. Instead of feeling hurt, you recognize that their understanding is shaped by their own mind, not by your worth. This creates a sense of inner stability. You are no longer shaken by every opinion. You are no longer affected by every judgment. You are no longer trying to control how others see you. You begin to live more authentically. Because when you are not trying to be understood, you stop performing. You stop adjusting yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. You stop saying things just to gain approval. You start acting from a place that is true to you, not from a place that is designed to be accepted. This authenticity brings a different kind of confidence. Not loud, not forced, but quiet and steady. You know who you are, and that is enough. Another important shift happens in your relationships. When you need to be understood, you often create tension. You expect others to meet your emotional needs, to validate your perspective, to align with your thinking. And when they don't, you feel disconnected or frustrated. But when you let go of that need, your relationships become lighter. You allow people to be who they are, without demanding that they fully understand you. You listen more, you expect less, and you create space for differences. This reduces conflict and creates a more natural flow in your interactions. You also become less defensive. When someone disagrees with you, you don't feel the need to prove yourself. When someone misunderstands you, you don't feel the urge to correct them immediately. You remain grounded because your sense of self is not dependent on their perception. This is a form of inner freedom. You are no longer tied to the opinions of others. You are no longer seeking constant approval. You are no longer trying to manage how you are seen. You are simply being. This does not mean you ignore all feedback or isolate yourself. It means you are selective about what you take in. You listen, you consider, but you do not let every opinion shape your identity. You maintain your center. At a deeper level, letting go of the need to be understood also connects to letting go of the ego. The ego wants recognition. It wants to be right. It wants to be seen in a certain way. When someone misunderstands you, the ego feels threatened. It reacts by trying to defend, explain, or correct. But when you are aware of this, you begin to see that this reaction is not necessary. You do not need to prove yourself to exist. You do not need validation to have value. You do not need everyone to understand you to be at peace. This realization removes a significant amount of pressure from your life. You stop overthinking your words. You stop replaying conversations. You stop worrying about how you are perceived. You become more present. You focus on what you are doing, not on how it will be interpreted. You act with clarity, not with the constant need for approval. You speak with intention, not with the fear of being misunderstood. And this creates a sense of ease. Life feels lighter because you are no longer carrying the weight of trying to control other people's understanding. As this understanding deepens, you begin to notice something interesting. The less you try to be understood, the more naturally people begin to understand you. Because you are no longer forcing it. You are not over-explaining. You are not trying to impress. You are not seeking validation. You are simply expressing yourself clearly and calmly. And that clarity is easier for others to receive. But even if they don't fully understand, it no longer disturbs you. Because your peace is not dependent on it. This is the essence of this lesson. Letting go of the need to be understood is not about disconnecting from others. It is about freeing yourself from unnecessary dependence on their perception. It is about realizing that your inner state should not be controlled by external opinions. It is about finding stability within yourself so that you are not constantly seeking it outside. And once you reach this point, something inside you becomes very quiet. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer feel the need to explain everything. You become more grounded, more centered, more at ease. You move through life without constantly checking how you are being seen. You act, you speak, you live from a place that is true to you. And that is enough. Because in the end, peace does not come from being understood by everyone. It comes from understanding yourself deeply and not needing anything beyond that. 11. Inner peace is your true goal. There is a quiet misunderstanding that shapes how most people live their entire lives, and it begins with what they believe will finally make them feel complete. From a young age, you are taught to chase things: success, money, recognition, relationships, achievements. You are told that once you reach a certain point, once you get what you want, once everything falls into place, you will finally feel at peace. So you start chasing. You chase goals. You chase approval. You chase a future version of life that promises satisfaction. And for a moment, when you achieve something, it feels like you made it. There is a short period of excitement, a brief sense of fulfillment, but then something strange happens. The feeling fades. The satisfaction disappears. And the mind begins searching again. Another goal, another desire, another reason to keep moving. This cycle continues endlessly. You achieve something, you feel good for a while, and then the mind moves the target further. It tells you that what you have is not enough. that you need more, that peace is still somewhere ahead. This is the trap. Because what you are chasing is not the thing itself. You are chasing the feeling you believe it will give you. Peace. But the truth that Buddhist wisdom reveals is this. Inner peace is not something you achieve by getting more. It is something you discover by needing less. Everything you chase outside is temporary. Success can fade, money can come and go, people can change, situations can shift. If your peace depends on these things, then your peace will always be unstable. You will feel good when things go your way, and you will feel disturbed when they don't. This is not real peace. Real peace is not dependent on conditions. It does not come and go based on outcomes. It is not something you have to maintain by controlling everything around you. It is something that exists within you, beneath all the noise, beneath all the chasing, beneath all the constant movement of the mind. But to experience it, you have to stop looking for it outside. This is where the shift begins. Instead of asking, "What do I need to get to feel better?" you begin to ask, "What can I let go of to feel lighter?" You start observing your desires, your expectations, your constant need for more. You begin to see how the mind is always reaching, always wanting, always dissatisfied. And when you see this clearly, you begin to step back. You realize that the constant chasing is what is disturbing your peace, not the lack of what you are chasing. This realization is powerful because it changes your direction. You stop running forward endlessly and you start looking inward. You begin to notice the moments when your mind is quiet, when you are not thinking about the next thing, when you are not comparing, not worrying, not chasing. In those moments, there is a natural sense of calm. Nothing special has happened. Nothing external has changed, but you feel at ease. That is inner peace. It is not created. It is revealed. It has always been there, but it is usually covered by the noise of the mind. The constant thinking, the constant wanting, the constant dissatisfaction. When these layers begin to fall away, even for a moment, you experience what has been there all along. A steady calm, a quiet clarity, a sense of being okay, without needing anything else. As you become more aware of this, your priorities begin to change. You still act, you still work, you still pursue things, but the intention is different. You are no longer chasing things to complete yourself. You are engaging with life from a place that is already complete. This removes pressure. You are no longer desperate for outcomes. You are no longer attaching your worth to success or failure. You are simply participating in life, not depending on it to give you peace. This creates a sense of freedom. You can enjoy things without clinging to them. You can experience success without becoming dependent on it. You can face challenges without losing yourself in them, because your inner state is no longer tied to external conditions. Another important shift happens in how you handle difficulties. When your goal is external success, every obstacle feels like a threat. Every failure feels like a setback. But when your goal is inner peace, challenges become opportunities to deepen your awareness. Instead of reacting immediately, you observe. Instead of resisting, you accept. Instead of being overwhelmed, you remain steady. This does not mean you avoid problems. It means you face them with a different mindset. You are not fighting life. You are understanding it. This understanding reduces unnecessary suffering. You begin to see that most of your stress is not coming from the situation itself, but from how your mind is reacting to it. The resistance, the overthinking, the attachment, these are what create tension. When you let go of these patterns, even difficult situations become more manageable. You respond instead of reacting. You stay calm instead of becoming overwhelmed. You remain clear instead of getting lost in confusion. This is the power of inner peace. It does not remove challenges, but it changes how you experience them. As this awareness deepens, you also become less dependent on external validation. You no longer need constant approval to feel good about yourself. You no longer need others to confirm your worth. You are not seeking recognition to feel complete. You know your value, not because someone told you, but because you are connected to yourself. This creates a quiet confidence. Not loud, not forced, but stable. You are comfortable with yourself, even in silence, even when no one is watching, even when nothing is happening. And this is rare, because most people are uncomfortable without stimulation, without validation, without something to chase. But you begin to find comfort in stillness. You begin to enjoy your own presence. You begin to feel complete without needing constant input from the outside. This is where true fulfillment begins. Not in achieving more, but in needing less. Not in controlling life, but in understanding it. Not in chasing peace, but in realizing it has always been within you. This does not mean you stop growing or stop improving your life. It means your growth is no longer driven by dissatisfaction. It is driven by awareness. You act because it feels right, not because you feel incomplete. You move forward, but you are not running. You evolve, but you are not chasing. This balance creates a life that is both active and peaceful. You are engaged, but not attached. You are focused, but not stressed. You are present, but not pressured. And this is the essence of Buddhist wisdom: to live fully, without losing your inner stillness, to experience life without being controlled by it, to act without attachment, to be without needing anything more. At the deepest level, inner peace is not a goal you reach at the end of a journey. It is the foundation of how you walk the journey itself. It is not something waiting for you in the future. It is something available to you now, in this moment, if you are willing to see it. And once you truly experience it, once you feel that quiet, stable calm that does not depend on anything outside, your perspective changes completely. You stop searching. You stop chasing. You stop believing that something is missing. Because you realize nothing was missing. You were just looking in the wrong place. And now that you have found it within, everything else becomes lighter, clearer, and deeply peaceful. 12. Observe, don't react. There is a small space in every moment of your life, a space so subtle that most people never notice it, yet so powerful that it has the ability to change everything. It is the space between what happens and how you respond to it. Most people never see this space. Something happens, and they react instantly. A word is spoken, and they respond without thinking. A situation appears, and they are immediately pulled into emotion. Anger, frustration, fear, anxiety. It all rises automatically, as if there is no other option. This is how the mind operates when it is not observed. It reacts, not because it has to, but because it is conditioned to. Years of habits, past experiences, and repeated patterns have trained the mind to respond in certain ways. When something triggers you, the reaction is already prepared. It feels natural, automatic, almost unavoidable. But this is where Buddhist wisdom reveals something important. Reaction is not the only option. Between the event and the reaction, there is a moment of awareness, a pause, a gap. And inside that gap is your freedom. The problem is not that the gap doesn't exist. The problem is that it is too small to notice when you are not aware. The mind moves too fast. It jumps from stimulus to reaction without giving you time to see what is happening. But when you begin to observe your mind, that gap starts to widen. You start to notice the trigger. You start to feel the emotion rising. You start to see the reaction forming. And instead of immediately acting on it, you pause. This pause is powerful, because in that moment, you are no longer being controlled by the situation. You are aware of it. You are present with it. You are not lost inside it. This changes everything. Think about how many problems in your life are created by reaction. A small comment turns into a big argument. A moment of frustration leads to words you regret. A stressful situation causes you to act in a way that creates more stress. These reactions feel justified in the moment. The mind tells you that you are right, that your response is necessary, that you need to react this way. But later, when the emotion fades, you often see things differently. You realize that the reaction was not helpful. You see that it created more problems than it solved. You feel the weight of what could have been avoided. This is the cost of unconscious reaction. But when you observe instead of react, you interrupt this cycle. You give yourself a moment to see clearly. When something triggers you, instead of immediately responding, you notice what is happening inside you. You feel the emotion, but you do not act on it instantly. You watch the thoughts that are forming, but you do not follow them blindly. This creates space. And in that space, your response becomes conscious. You are no longer acting from habit. You are choosing how to respond. This does not mean you suppress your emotions or ignore what you feel. It means you allow the emotion to exist without letting it control your actions. You feel it, you observe it, but you do not become it. This is a subtle but powerful shift. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you begin to see, "There is anger." Instead of being fully consumed by the emotion, you are aware of it, and that awareness reduces its intensity. Emotions are like waves. When you react immediately, you are pulled into the wave, carried by it, overwhelmed by it. But when you observe, you are standing at the shore, watching the wave rise and fall. The wave still exists, but it does not control you. Over time, this practice changes the way you experience emotions. They become less overwhelming. They pass more quickly. They have less power over your actions. You begin to feel more stable, more grounded, more in control. Not because you are controlling the world, but because you are understanding your own mind. Another important aspect of observation is clarity. When you react instantly, your perception is often distorted by emotion. You do not see the situation clearly. You see it through the lens of your feelings, your assumptions, your past experiences. But when you pause and observe, you create distance from that distortion. You see the situation more objectively. You understand it more deeply. You respond in a way that is more aligned with reality. This leads to better decisions. You are no longer acting impulsively. You are acting with awareness. This applies to every area of life. In conversations, you listen more carefully instead of reacting to every word. In challenges, you think more clearly instead of panicking. In moments of stress, you remain calm instead of becoming overwhelmed. This does not make life perfect, but it makes your experience of life more stable. You are no longer constantly thrown off balance by every situation. You remain centered. This is what it means to have control over your mind, not by forcing it to be quiet, not by suppressing emotions, but by observing it. The more you observe, the more you understand. The more you understand, the less you react. And the less you react, the more peaceful your mind becomes. There will still be moments when you react without awareness. There will still be times when emotions take over. This is part of the process. The goal is not perfection, but awareness. Every time you notice that you reacted unconsciously, you learn something. You become more aware of your patterns, your triggers, your habits. And with that awareness, the next time becomes easier. The gap becomes wider. The pause becomes longer. The control becomes stronger. This is how change happens. Not through force, but through understanding. As this practice deepens, you begin to experience life differently. You are less reactive, less impulsive, less controlled by external events. You become more present, more aware, more intentional. And this creates a sense of inner peace. Because most of your suffering is not caused by what happens, but by how you react to it. When you change your reaction, you change your experience. You stop adding unnecessary pain to situations. You stop creating problems through impulsive actions. You stop being controlled by every emotional wave. Instead, you observe. You pause. You choose. And in that choice, you find freedom. This is the power of observing instead of reacting. It is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming aware. It is about creating space between you and your impulses. It is about realizing that you have a choice in every moment. And once you truly understand this, once you experience the difference between reacting unconsciously and responding with awareness, your entire way of living begins to change. You become calmer in situations that used to disturb you. You become clearer in moments that used to confuse you. You become stronger in ways that are quiet but powerful. Because now, you are not just living, you are aware of how you live. And that awareness changes everything. 13. Growth feels lonely. There is a phase in your life that very few people talk about, yet almost everyone who begins to change deeply will go through it. It is not loud, it is not obvious, and it does not come with clear signs. It is quiet, internal, and often confusing. It is the feeling of becoming distant from everything that once felt familiar. You start noticing that conversations no longer interest you the same way. The things that once entertained you begin to feel empty. The habits you used to enjoy start losing their pull. Even the people around you may feel different, not because they changed, but because you did. At first, this shift feels uncomfortable. You may wonder what is happening. You may question yourself. You may feel like something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. This is growth. Buddhist wisdom teaches that as awareness deepens, attachment to superficial things begins to fade. You start seeing things more clearly. You begin to recognize what truly matters and what does not. And when this clarity comes, your connection to certain people, environments, and behaviors naturally begins to change. But this change creates space, and that space can feel like loneliness, because you are no longer fully connected to your old patterns, but you have not yet fully stepped into your new ones. You are in between. You are evolving, but you are not yet settled. This in-between phase is where most people struggle. They feel the discomfort of change and assume something is wrong. They try to go back to their old habits, their old ways of thinking, their old environment, just to feel a sense of familiarity again. But it doesn't feel the same anymore, because once your awareness expands, you cannot shrink it back. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot unknow what you now understand. So, you remain in this space, not fully where you were, not fully where you are going. And this is where loneliness appears. It is not the loneliness of being physically alone. It is the feeling of being internally different from those around you. You start to notice that your priorities have changed. Your values have shifted. The way you see life is no longer the same. And because of that, you may feel misunderstood. You may feel like others don't see what you see. You may feel like you can't fully express what you are experiencing. This can create a sense of isolation, but this is a natural part of growth. When you evolve, your environment does not immediately evolve with you. There is a gap, and in that gap, you feel alone. But this loneliness is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is changing. It is the space where your old identity is dissolving and your new awareness is forming. And this process requires distance. Distance from old patterns. Distance from old attachments. Distance from things that no longer align with who you are becoming. This distance can feel uncomfortable, but it is necessary, because growth cannot happen if you remain exactly where you were. Another important truth is that growth often requires you to stand alone for a while. Not because you are meant to be isolated forever, but because this phase allows you to reconnect with yourself without external influence. It gives you the space to understand who you are becoming without being pulled back into who you used to be. In this space, you begin to develop a deeper relationship with yourself. You spend more time in your own thoughts. You reflect more. You observe more. And slowly, you begin to understand yourself in a way that was not possible before. This self-understanding becomes your foundation. Instead of relying on others for constant connection, you begin to feel comfortable with your own presence. You no longer need constant noise or distraction to feel okay. You start to appreciate silence, solitude, and stillness. What once felt like loneliness begins to feel like peace. This is a powerful transformation, because now you are no longer afraid of being alone. You are not seeking constant validation. You are not depending on others to fill your space. You are complete within yourself. And from this place, your connections with others begin to change as well. You no longer seek relationships out of need or emptiness. You seek them from a place of clarity. You connect with people who align with your growth, who understand your perspective, who share your values. These connections are fewer, but deeper, more meaningful, more authentic, more stable, because they are not based on surface-level interactions, but on genuine understanding. At the same time, you also become more accepting of those who do not align with you. You stop trying to change people. You stop expecting everyone to understand you. You allow others to be where they are. This reduces conflict. You are no longer frustrated by differences. You simply recognize them. And this creates a sense of calm in your interactions. Another shift happens in how you view solitude. Before, being alone may have felt uncomfortable. You may have needed constant distraction, constant activity, constant connection to feel okay. But as you grow, solitude becomes valuable. It becomes a space for clarity, a space for reflection, a space for inner peace. You begin to use this time to understand your thoughts, to observe your mind, to reconnect with yourself. And in doing so, you realize that being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness is the feeling of lacking connection, but solitude is the experience of being connected with yourself. And when you are connected with yourself, you are never truly alone. This is one of the most important realizations in this journey, because once you are comfortable in your own presence, you are no longer dependent on external situations to feel complete. You can be in a crowd and still feel centered. You can be alone and still feel fulfilled. Your state is no longer determined by your environment. It comes from within. This is where true strength begins. Not the strength that is visible to others, but the quiet strength of being at peace with yourself. As this process continues, the loneliness that once felt heavy begins to transform. It becomes a sign of alignment, a sign that you are no longer forcing yourself into spaces that do not resonate with you, a sign that you are moving towards something more authentic. And eventually, as you continue to grow, you will find people, environments, and experiences that match your new level of awareness. The loneliness fades, not because you avoided it, but because you moved through it. And in moving through it, you became stronger, more aware, more grounded, more aligned. This is why growth feels lonely. Not because you are losing something, but because you are becoming something new. And that transformation requires space. It requires distance. It requires time. It requires courage. But if you stay with it, if you do not run back to what feels familiar just to escape the discomfort, you will reach a point where that loneliness turns into something else. Clarity, peace, understanding. And from that place, your life begins to reflect who you truly are, not who you used to be. So if you feel this distance, if you feel this quiet separation from things that once felt normal, do not fear it. Do not try to escape it. This is not a step backward. This is growth. And you are exactly where you need to be. 14. Acceptance ends inner conflict. There is a constant battle happening inside most people, a quiet resistance that runs through their thoughts, their emotions, and their reactions. It is not always visible, but it is always there. It appears in the form of frustration, stress, overthinking, and emotional tension. And at the center of this struggle is one simple pattern: resisting what is already happening. You want things to be different. You want the situation to change. You want people to behave differently. You want the outcome to match your expectations. And when reality does not align with what you want, the mind pushes back. It argues with what is. It creates stories about how things should be. It replays events, imagines alternatives, and holds on to a version of reality that does not exist. This is where inner conflict begins. Not because life is difficult, but because you are resisting it. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering is not caused by reality itself, but by the resistance to reality. The moment you say, "This should not be happening," you create tension. The moment you refuse to accept what is already here, you divide yourself internally. Part of you sees reality as it is. Another part of you rejects it. And this division creates struggle. Think about how often this happens in your life. Something small goes wrong, and your mind reacts immediately. You feel irritation, not because the situation is unbearable, but because you did not want it to happen. You hold on to the idea that things should have gone differently, and that resistance creates stress. Or something bigger happens, something more serious, and the mind goes even deeper into resistance. It asks, "Why me?" It refuses to accept the situation. It keeps replaying the past, wishing things were different, wishing reality would change. But no matter how much you resist, reality does not move. It stays as it is. And the more you fight it, the more exhausted you become. This is the trap of resistance. You are trying to change something that has already happened. You are trying to control something that is already out of your hands. And in doing so, you create unnecessary suffering. Acceptance is the opposite of this. But acceptance is often misunderstood. Many people think acceptance means giving up, being passive, or allowing everything to happen without taking action. They think it means weakness. But that is not what acceptance is. Acceptance is not about agreeing with everything that happens. It is not about liking the situation. It is not about avoiding action. Acceptance is about seeing reality clearly, without fighting it. It is about acknowledging what is already here, without adding resistance to it. When you accept something, you are not saying, "This is good." You are saying, "This is what is happening." And that simple shift removes a huge amount of inner tension. Because now, You are no longer arguing with reality. You are aligned with it. From this place, your mind becomes calmer. The constant mental noise of, "This should not be happening," begins to fade. You stop replaying the past. You stop wishing things were different. You become present with what is actually here. And in that presence, something changes. Clarity appears. When you are not resisting, you can see the situation more clearly. You are not clouded by frustration or emotional reaction. You are not stuck in the past or lost in imagined scenarios. You are here, aware and grounded. And from that clarity, you can take better action. This is why acceptance is powerful. It does not stop you from acting. It allows you to act more effectively. When you accept reality, you stop wasting energy fighting it. You redirect that energy toward understanding it and responding to it. For example, if something goes wrong, instead of resisting it, you accept that it has happened. You do not like it, but you acknowledge it. And from that place, you can focus on what needs to be done next. Your actions become calmer, more precise, more effective, because they are not driven by emotional resistance. Another important aspect of acceptance is how it changes your relationship with emotions. When you resist an emotion, it becomes stronger. If you feel sadness and you try to push it away, it stays longer. If you feel anxiety and you fight it, it intensifies. The more you resist, the more the emotion persists. But when you accept the emotion, when you allow it to exist without trying to control it, something different happens. The emotion begins to move. It rises, it stays for a while, and then it fades. Because emotions are temporary. They do not need to be forced away. They need to be allowed to pass. Acceptance creates the space for this process. You feel the emotion, but you do not become overwhelmed by it. You observe it, you allow it, and you trust that it will not last forever. This reduces the intensity of emotional suffering. You are no longer fighting your own feelings. You are understanding them. At a deeper level, acceptance also changes how you see control. Most of your inner conflict comes from trying to control things that are outside your control. You want people to act a certain way. You want situations to unfold according to your plan. You want certainty in an uncertain world. But life does not offer that level of control. When you accept this, when you accept that you cannot control everything, you release a significant amount of pressure. You stop trying to force outcomes. You stop trying to manage every detail. You stop expecting life to follow your script. And in that release, you feel lighter. You still take action. You still make decisions. But you are no longer attached to controlling every result. You do what you can, and you accept what you cannot change. This creates balance. Effort without tension. Action without attachment. Movement without resistance. Another shift happens in how you experience the present moment. When you resist reality, you are always somewhere else. You are in the past, wishing things were different, or in the future, hoping things will change. You are not fully here. But when you accept, you return to the present. You experience what is happening now, without trying to escape it. And in that presence, you find a sense of calm. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer fighting what is. This is where inner peace begins. Not in changing the world, but in changing your relationship with it. Not in controlling every outcome, but in accepting the flow of life. As this understanding deepens, you begin to see acceptance not as a single action, but as a way of living. In every moment, you have a choice. You can resist, or you can accept. Resistance creates tension. Acceptance creates peace. Resistance keeps you stuck. Acceptance allows you to move forward. Resistance drains your energy. Acceptance frees it. This does not mean life becomes easy or free of challenges. It means your experience of life becomes lighter. You are no longer carrying the extra weight of fighting reality. You face situations with clarity. You handle emotions with awareness. You respond to life with calmness. And this creates a deep sense of stability. You are not shaken by every change. You are not overwhelmed by every difficulty. You are not controlled by every emotion. You remain grounded. This is the power of acceptance. It ends the inner conflict that comes from resisting what is already happening. It aligns you with reality instead of against it. It allows you to move through life with less struggle and more understanding. And once you truly experience this, once you feel the difference between resisting and accepting, you begin to choose acceptance more often. Because you see its impact, you feel the calm it brings, you notice the clarity it creates, you understand the freedom it offers, and slowly, your entire way of living begins to change. You are no longer fighting life. You are flowing with it. And in that flow, you find something that most people are still searching for: a quiet, steady, unshakable peace. 15. Awakening is a continuous journey. There is one final truth that changes how you see everything you've experienced so far, and it is this: awakening is not a destination. It is not a moment you reach where everything suddenly becomes perfect. It is not a final state where your mind is completely silent forever, where no challenges exist, and where life becomes permanently peaceful. Awakening is a process. It is something that unfolds over time, layer by layer, insight by insight, awareness by awareness. And the moment you understand this, you release one of the biggest hidden pressures on your journey: the pressure to arrive. Most people begin this path thinking there will be a point where everything clicks, where they will finally feel complete, where their mind will stop creating problems, where they will never feel confused, emotional, or lost again. They imagine a version of themselves that is fully awakened, fully peaceful, and untouched by the struggles of life. But this expectation is another illusion. Because the mind is always evolving, always changing, always presenting new layers to understand. Even as you grow, even as you become more aware, new challenges appear. Not as setbacks, but as opportunities to deepen your understanding. This is what makes the journey continuous. Every stage reveals something new. Every experience teaches something deeper. Every moment offers another chance to observe, to understand, to grow. There is no final endpoint where learning stops. And this is not something to be disappointed about. It is something to be freed by. Because once you stop chasing a final destination, you begin to appreciate the journey itself. You stop asking, "When will I finally be at peace?" And you start noticing, there is peace in this moment. You stop trying to rush your growth, and you begin to allow it to unfold naturally. This changes everything, because now you are not forcing yourself to become something. You are simply becoming aware of what is already happening within you. At times, you will feel clear, calm, and deeply connected. Your mind will feel quiet. Your awareness will feel strong. You will see things with clarity, and life will feel aligned. And then, at other times, the mind will become active again. Old patterns may return, emotions may rise, confusion may appear. And in those moments, it may feel like you are going backward, but you are not. This is part of the process. Awakening is not a straight line. It is a cycle of seeing, forgetting, and seeing again, each time with deeper understanding. What once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. What once controlled you now feels distant. What once confused you now feels clearer. Even when challenges appear, your relationship with them has changed. You are more aware, more patient, more grounded. This is growth. Not the absence of difficulty, but the transformation of how you experience it. Another important shift happens when you stop identifying your progress based on constant calmness. Many people think that awakening means always feeling peaceful, always being calm, always being unaffected, but this is not realistic. Peace is not the absence of movement in the mind. It is the ability to remain aware within that movement. You may still experience emotions, but you are not lost in them. You may still have thoughts, but you are not controlled by them. You may still face challenges, but you are not overwhelmed by them. This is a deeper kind of stability. Not fragile, not dependent on perfect conditions, but steady, even as things change. As this understanding deepens, you begin to trust the process. You stop doubting your path every time you feel confused. You stop judging yourself for not being perfect. You stop comparing your journey to others, because you realize that everyone's path is different. Some people move quickly. Some people move slowly. Some people experience intense shifts. Others grow gradually over time. There is no fixed pattern. And once you accept this, you become more patient with yourself. You allow yourself to grow at your own pace. This patience is important because awakening cannot be rushed. It is not something you achieve by forcing your mind to be quiet or by trying to eliminate all thoughts. It is something that emerges naturally as your awareness deepens. The more you observe, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more you let go. The more you let go, the more peace reveals itself. This is the natural flow of awakening. It does not require struggle. It does not require perfection. It requires awareness. Another powerful realization is that awakening is not separate from your daily life. It is not something that only happens during meditation or in quiet moments. It is present in every situation, every interaction, every challenge. When you are aware in a conversation, that is awakening. When you observe your reaction, instead of acting on it, that is awakening. When you let go of something that once controlled you, that is awakening. It is not a distant goal. It is happening now, in small moments, in subtle shifts, in quiet realizations. And the more you recognize this, the more you see that you are already on the path. You are not starting from zero. You are not behind. You are already moving. Even the fact that you are reflecting, observing, and seeking understanding is part of the journey. This removes a lot of pressure. You are no longer trying to become awakened. You are recognizing the awakening that is already unfolding. And this recognition creates a sense of ease. You are not chasing something far away. You are noticing something that is already here. At a deeper level, awakening also changes how you see life itself. You begin to see life not as a series of problems to solve, but as a process to understand. Challenges are no longer obstacles to your peace. They are opportunities to deepen your awareness. Difficult moments are no longer something to avoid. They are part of the journey. Even confusion becomes meaningful, because every moment, whether calm or chaotic, is part of your growth. This perspective creates a different kind of resilience. You are no longer shaken by every change. You are not discouraged by every difficulty. You trust that whatever is happening is part of your path. This trust does not mean everything will always feel easy. It means you no longer resist the process. You move with it. And in that movement, you find a deeper sense of stability. As you continue on this path, you may notice that your understanding becomes more subtle. At first, awakening feels like a big shift, a noticeable change in how you see things. But over time, it becomes quieter, less dramatic, more natural. You are not constantly thinking about it. You are simply living with more awareness. Your reactions are calmer. Your thoughts are clear. Your presence is stronger. And this becomes your new normal. You are no longer trying to be aware. You are aware. This is the quiet transformation. Not something that needs to be announced or proven, but something that is felt within. And as this continues, you begin to understand something very important. There is no final version of you to reach. There is no perfect state to achieve. There is only this ongoing process of understanding, of observing, of becoming more aware. And that is enough, because the goal was never to escape life. The goal was to understand it. The goal was never to eliminate the mind. The goal was to see through it. The goal was never to reach a permanent state. The goal was to become present with each moment as it is. And once you truly understand this, something inside you relaxes. You stop searching for the end. You stop chasing perfection. You stop waiting for a moment where everything will finally be complete, because you realize this is it, this moment, this awareness, this journey. And instead of trying to reach the end, you begin to walk it with clarity, with patience, with presence. You continue to grow. You continue to learn. You continue to deepen your understanding. Not because you are lacking something, but because growth is part of your nature. And that is the beauty of awakening. It is not something you finish. It is something you live. Every day, every moment, every breath. And once you truly see this, you stop asking when it will end, because you understand it has already begun. If you've watched this far, then something inside you already understands. This isn't just information. This is recognition, because the truth is, you didn't find this video by accident. You're here because your mind is changing. You're starting to see things differently. You're becoming more aware, more calm, more detached from what once controlled you. And that can feel confusing, sometimes even lonely. But now you know. This is not a breakdown. This is a transformation. You are not losing yourself. You are finding your true self. So don't rush this process. Don't try to go back to who you were. And don't be afraid of the silence, the distance, or the change. Because this path leads to something most people never reach: clarity, peace, freedom. And once you step into this awareness, there is no going back. So, if this message resonated with you, take a moment, pause, and just observe your mind, because your journey has already begun.